Hello, this is response to real racists. I'm gonna go. I'm not gonna get angry. I'm not going to respond like you probably would think I would respond. I'm a black man. I am an anti-racist, but I think that anti-racist. We need to be concerned about some of the things that this video has said and other videos like this has said. We're getting, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I do understand where you're coming from. You feel that whites are being attacked. You feel that there's an anti-white sentiment in America. And to a degree, I do believe there is an anti-white sentiment in America. And some anti-racists said that's impossible. The whites rule the world. The whites rule, the government. How can there be an anti-white racist sentiment? Well, whites themselves can be racist toward themselves. Now, in saying that, how should I say this? In saying that, there also is anti-black racism, that still exists in America. That still does not negate, the institutional racism toward blacks. And no, we cannot, as black people, we cannot blame institutional racism for our high crime rate, white on black crime. This is, black on white crime, which, yes, it is greater than white on black crime. Because of not necessarily racial hatred like white nationalists try to say, but other factors. So I do concede that black on black crime, black on white crime, lower educational achievement. You can't continue to blame Whitey for all this stuff. Yes, we can say in history, the classic Whitey did this. Jim Crow, yes, that existed. But yeah, there's some things that within the black community, especially in educational leadership, need to be held accountable for. In saying all this, yes, there are black racists out there. Your video wants us to say, you call these people the real racists. Well, yeah, they are real racists. The only thing I can tell you, because I did, and I'm going to be fair, because I did put white supremacist. I did not demonize white supremacists. I analyzed one white supremacist on YouTube. His name's Akoba Dagev, in a not positive light, but in a more human light. So I'm going to do the same with black racists. Okay, let me explain why you do have anti-white sentiment. Okay. The obvious reason is that there are things in history that whites have done, not personally you, white ancestors have done to black people, that has contributed to many of the things that I've just described. Not solely, because it's been 40 years, so blame Whitey, the stream starting to get balanced here. Okay. Okay. Yes, white racism still exists, but there's got to be some things in the African American community we need to look at ourselves, especially in education, why we're not achieving as we should be. It's saying that still those historical things have happened. And now, and yes, even today, because I believe that you would say that racism doesn't exist, but there are studies where, whites are not trying to necessarily be evil about it and say, they don't like, they want blacks lynched, but there are certain things, certain biases, which I'll show you the studies later on, which is part of the race reality, certain things that whites do as institutions that are biased against blacks. So, the image of, the stereotype of the white racist, yes, there's still some kernel of truth to it. Okay, It's more subtle, which means it's more subconscious, which I don't think whites necessarily are intentionally trying to be racist or trying to be racially biased, but in practice they are. Okay, and I'll show you some studies, and you can take what it's worth, Okay. So I covered all the bases. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and keep rambling. I mean, yeah, blacks, there's some dumb things that blacks have done, which they can't blame whitey for, to contribute for piss poor educational standards. You know, education's for whites, you know, this cultural image. As a community, we have failed to value other things of intellectual capacity as much as whites, certainly Asians. You know, so there's things that, you know, blacks we need to look at ourselves. We past 40 years, and no, we can't expect blacks to, you know, become equal to whites in 40 years when after 200 years they weren't equal. Okay, so yes, in present day times you're gonna see anti-white sentiment to some degree. The thing in New Orleans, I want to comment about that. That black guy was probably getting sick and tired of him as a black person who has not committed one crime being perceived as a criminal, being perceived as uncivilized. And yes, it was a fact that, I'm sure it's a fact that there was looting, and disproportionate amount of minorities were looting, and as a reaction to Hurricane Katrina. Yes, I understand all that, but that was his reaction. I mean, just like he's the same as you, though. You just think about it. You're tired of being seen as the slave master. Your people historically being seen as a slave master, lynchers of black people, subtle racists now. You're just tired of, you know, being blamed for why black people's so-called problems. I just call them opportunities. So, you know, both of you shared something very similar. I mean, but in both cases, there's truth. I mean, there's a strong amount of truth. I mean, Hurricane Katrina, yes, black people did act up. It was, yes, we understand, you know, yes, there's some type of sociological reasons for it, but that happened. And yes, white people did enslave blacks. And yes, the type of slavery that whites gave blacks historically still influences the economic disparity. It can't be right now. It can't be the sole cause. And yes, blacks got to look at themselves to a point. So in both cases, you know, there's uncomfortable truths toward each race. And I want to get to this point. I mean, white nationalists do make a good point about historically whites have conquered non-whites. They put blacks in slavery. They have, you know, murdered. They have exterminated. You know, they've just done horrible things. And it's not just black people who believe it. White people believe that. Here's the thing. Here's my thing. The last 600 years, yes, just like black on white crime in America, yes, that is true. Don't sit there and bullshit yourself and try to, you know, pretty it up. There's no way that you can deny it. That is a fact. But guess what? There have been non-white races that have conquered whiting. Yes, believe it or not, the Mongols have conquered white people for a long time. And yes, you know, the white nationalists who point out, you know, slavery doesn't start with us, they're right. I mean, blacks have enslaved blacks, Arabs have enslaved blacks, the Greeks were, you know, Greeks had slaves, there were white slaves, yes. But the major point is that I guess what black people get frustrated about, black people like me get frustrated about, is that I think white nationalists, you know, some whites want to sit there and try to disregard that as part of the effect of black failure in many ways in Western society. You can't do that. You know, that shit existed, and there's no way you can dispute it. And it's only been 40 years, man. 200 years. This shit has been existed for 200 years. So the last 600 years, yeah, it's true what black nationalists